Welcome back to another episode of Nearly Verified. My name is Matt Puglisi and I'm your host. This will be episode 7. It's going to be a little bit different. I am doing it solo today. I read somewhere that there is a 7-episode curse for podcasts. Don't know how real that is. Probably not a thing, but for some reason in my head that stuck. So I kind of wanted to laugh in its face today and say, hey, episode 7, we made it. I've got a few more recorded that are going to be coming out in the coming weeks, but I thought I would just take the time to reflect on the guests I've already had, kind of the process of just jumping into podcasting, seeing what it's like, and share some key takeaways. So I want to get things started with a shout out to the very first sponsor of the podcast, which is very exciting. For this episode, it's Blue Springs Lighting and Irrigation. They have got you for any of your family's irrigation and landscape lighting needs out of Niagara or Muskoka. Shout out to Dan Williams and his team for wanting to support. Really appreciate you, Dan. That's actually one of my family friends from Niagara. So you're the man. Thank you again. But I'm going to dive right into it. So starting with the first few guests, it's crazy how it all kind of came together. I was actually watching the live stream of Quinton Alums, or Alums. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. Q. I usually just call him Q. But I was watching his live stream because I've been following him on LinkedIn for a while. There was 30 or 40 people watching the live stream, and I just wanted to shoot my shot. I said, hey, Q, typed in the chat, hey, Q, wondering if you'd want to hop on my podcast, which did not exist at the time. He ends up reading it, says yes, gets the whole thing started. So I'll get more into that later, but Q is a creative storyteller, entrepreneur. He's a podcast host, TEDx speaker, and esports enthusiast. He is just the dopest guy. I'm so glad I got the chance to talk to him, especially as my first guest. I was extremely stiff and nervous that whole interview. I'm sure if you've listened to it or watched it, you could tell. Super nervous, and those nerves don't really go away, just to say. That's how it is for me, at least. But I got a little more comfortable as the episodes went on. But Q was an awesome conversation. We talked about patience and entrepreneurship. We talked about building community, which is one of the largest things that I took away from that convo. You could have 1 million followers, but those people might not be engaging with you, or they might not be engaging with each other. And that's not a community. That's just a follower base. Very different things. Community, it's reciprocal value. People are coming in to get something out of it and also to give, which I thought was really, really cool. And Q's just overall, as a dude, I look up to him a lot. How he carries himself, how he does his work. I just think he's very inspiring, and he is a huge reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. So shout out Q. Second guest was Sam Lister. He is 20 years old, also out of Milwaukee. Met him, I think I Instagram DM'd him and invited him. But he has so much energy. He's a very, very driven dude, very well spoken. He's got his own podcast. He started with his personal brand on LinkedIn, which then kind of flourished into a video agency, which he is now killing it in. I know COVID kind of shifted things around for him, but he's doing an awesome job. So really cool to talk with him. He was just a very passionate conversation to have. We talked about dream podcast guests being Elon Musk. We talked about just breaking down the walls, being authentic with yourself, and we also chatted about routine, which is one of my key takeaways from all of my podcast conversations, is building routine. I see that as a clear constant through high performers across the board, and something that I've been really, really trying to work on myself. Not easy, but for example, I've been trying to get up earlier, start the day earlier, kind of get a head start. Been trying to go on more walks, get my body moving, things like that. More runs as well, just exercising. That also links into another conversation. I think that was episode 5, which I'll get into. But yeah, Sam, such a cool guy. He was also down to help connect me with all these different people. Q and Sam really got it started for me, and they said, hey, how can we help you? How can we, connect you with the right people? If you have any questions, reach out. So I really appreciated them and how much they were willing to support me, especially being some random kid that was like, hey, want to talk. They were awesome, and I also DM them every now and then and just kind of give them updates because they were so good to me at the start, and I want to keep shouting them out because they were a huge help. Next guest I was really excited for. This is Buster Scher. He is the 20-year-old NBA social media mogul. This guy was incredibly down to earth. He's been broadcasting the NBA and basketball since his early teens, and he started this brand called Hoops Nation, which he started on Facebook, then moved to Instagram and Snapchat. They just hit 1 million followers. This is no joke. He's absolutely killing it. So to talk to him about sports cards, how that market is blowing up right now. If you don't know about sports cards, I would definitely check it out. That market is going crazy. So we talked about that, talked about the NBA, his story, being so young and just kind of diving into the world of social media and branding and like consulting for NBA legends and hip hop artists. Like, he's doing some very, very cool stuff. So to get to hear that, that story of his and his experiences and his tips was unreal. So Buster, you're the man. So episode 4, I had Carol Lehman on the show. She is the CEO of Exonify, which is a learning platform, and they sell it to companies who need to train their frontline more efficiently, or if they have like a business problem that they need to tackle, whether it be, better call centers, like having better quality conversations, or reducing injuries on site, or just having better training for your salespeople in retail. So like they do grocery stores and retail, like clothing retail and stuff like that. That was my first internship, actually. I did it at Exonify, and it was an incredible experience. I loved working for a company where I would see that the platform is making businesses better. That got me really inspired to be working in that environment, as well as just the culture there was so welcoming. Like something I noticed when I was listening over that episode, I absolutely geeked out over my experience there. And maybe I didn't get to all the questions I wanted to get to because I was like gushing about how much I loved it. But Carol Lehman is an incredible leader. She sets the precedent for her employees, for the culture. She's doing incredible things at Exonify, and Exonify in general is doing incredible things. So shout out to Carol. That was a very, very cool conversation. I loved to catch up with her. That was the first time we had talked in a little while, so I really enjoyed that. Then I had Mark Metry, who is the host of the Humans 2.0 podcast. He is an author, keynote speaker, and entrepreneur. This guy is just like a next level human being. I read his book, Screw Being Shy, before interviewing him. So I had a lot of questions fresh off of reading that book. And he's just a very well-spoken guy. Like he dove into the topics of his book of mental health and building routine and cutting out negative coping mechanisms. Like he dove right into those early on in our episode, and he just wanted to, dive in and dig into those issues. And I had some follow-up questions for him, but he was just a very well-spoken guy, and I really enjoyed hearing his perspective and learning more about his life through his book and through that episode. He's an all-star. So if you don't follow him, I would definitely recommend. He posts a lot of good stuff on LinkedIn every day. So Mark, thank you so much for hopping on my podcast. I really enjoyed that conversation. And then episode 6, which brings us to just about now, I had Shay Rowbottom, who is the queen of LinkedIn. She's absolutely killing it. She's killed it with LinkedIn video, and she comes from the Facebook agency business. She came over to LinkedIn and just, did amazing things. She now has a massive community there. But she recently started her own podcast as well, which we connected on, and she digs into her deep-rooted story of pain as a child. Really deep stuff, very insightful, and I would recommend giving her a listen or check her out on any social media. She is just a very contagious, energetic person, and fantastic convo. I learned a lot from it, and we just kind of connected on another level, which was awesome. So those are the guests that I have got on the show so far. I've got a few more coming up, but I just wanted to thank everyone for coming on the podcast to begin with, and I'm very, very grateful that these people took the time. And if it wasn't for COVID, if it wasn't for the initial connections through Q and Sam, I wouldn't have been able to get in contact with these people. So I'm very appreciative of that. But I kind of wanted to break down a little bit about why I started the podcast. a little bit about me. I have been very involved in extracurriculars, and I've said this a few times in the episodes, but I have been very involved from high school. I was part of student council president, took up all my free time, but it was great. I learned a lot about responsibility and organization, taking accountability, all of those good things through being a student leader. Going into university, I said, you know what? I'm done. I'm done doing clubs and stuff. I'm just going to kick back, relax, enjoy this experience. For some reason, my brain doesn't let me do things sometimes. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to get involved. So I ended up getting involved in a bunch of clubs in first year. One of them being the first year project, which was just putting on events for first year students like myself. And then also ended up doing the Laurier Sales Association, where I learned so much as a digital marketing executive. So basically, from first year on to third year, which I just finished, I was involved all the way through. I put on events featuring like huge corporate sponsors, which was really cool, but I never did anything for myself. So I've been sitting on this idea of writing more or creating more or podcasting for about a year now. And my initial idea, which I talked about with Shay, was terrible, like so corny. It was the mini mic podcast. So I would have serious conversations with people holding these miniature microphones, which would have sounded like trash. It was a terrible idea, but I wanted to do it. So that formed into a real podcast, which I'm doing now, Nearly Verified. The idea behind the name is to not focus on, the end goal. So a lot of people have this end goal of being verified on social media, getting verification or validation from whatever else. Could be a job title, could be, a dollar amount that you're making per year at a job. And I just want to break that down, try and just focus on the journey, focus on the experiences leading towards whatever your end goal is. And I think I've done a pretty good job of that, but I'm going to continue to get better. And that's kind of why I started the podcast. I want to learn more about that entrepreneurial experience. I too want to be an entrepreneur one day. I'm not sure in what fashion, in what capacity, but it's something that I'm really interested in. And having these conversations is really helping me. It's giving me insights into that life, into that career, the career of different industries as well, being an entrepreneur. So I'm loving that. And I hope to continue to learn. Just want to be a sponge during these conversations. Sometimes I don't say a lot in the convos. And I think, I should have asked this or I should have done that. But just getting the chance to hear these people speak is the coolest thing to me. So some key takeaways that I got from the first 6 episodes, 7 episodes of Nearly Verified would be routine. It is such a constant. I know I said that earlier, but I'm trying so hard to figure out what routine works for me. And it's different for everybody. But implementing, little things into your day by day improvements will help you long term. And that's something that I struggled with because I was terrible at building routine for myself, especially being a university student with class being, online now. Gonna have so much free time. How can I structure my day so that I'm still productive and still doing things that I want to do? So that was one of my largest takeaways. Second would be surrounding yourself with the right people / location to be successful. So being in the right place and having the right people around you makes worlds of difference. Coming out of first year and finding, my core circle of friends that we then moved into this house with, it has helped me so much. And I went into first year not knowing anybody. Like I didn't have anyone from my graduating class come to Laurier. So that was very daunting. So the fact that I kind of had to start fresh, blank slate and say, okay, who am I going to surround myself that is going to support me, is going to help me grow? And I think I've definitely done a good job with that. But just surrounding yourself with the right people that are going to help push you to be the better version of yourself, I think that goes a long way, and it's such a key component of your success. And then lastly, just diving in and going for it. This is probably the most exciting and scary takeaway. I don't know what I'm doing, to be very candid with you. I don't really know how to podcast. I don't know how to hold these conversations. I just kind of dove into it. I asked my first guest before I even had a name for the podcast. I just kind of wanted to get this thing going, and I knew that it was in my wheelhouse of capability. I knew that I could speak somewhat. I knew that I could have these conversations. I knew I really, really wanted to. I wanted to chat with these people, and I wanted to learn. that's kind of the biggest takeaway of any of them. I want to learn how to be as successful as the guests that I'm having on. So just diving in and going for it. And that echoes a lot of the messages from the guests that I've had on. If you have an idea, if you have a passion, there are enough hours in the day to do that. Even if you have other commitments, there are enough hours in the day to dedicate even, half an hour to your grind or your side hustle or your passion or your hobby. Like, there is enough time. So I would say my piece of advice would just be go for it. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to look silly. There was a quote that I really, really enjoyed. There was a quote that I really liked that I read before I started, or just when I was starting this podcast, and it's, embarrassment is the cost of entry. You can't be a master without embarrassing yourself or looking like a fool along the way. And I think about that all the time. I'm definitely going to look like a fool at times during this podcast, but I just want to keep going, keep getting better, and that's the fun of it. So I want to finish this episode off with a shout out to Q. I know I already touched on it earlier when I was talking about him as a person, but Q is someone that I really, really look up to, and I want to thank you, Q, if you're listening to this. It has been inspiring to see your growth online and with your businesses and your personal brand, and it makes me want to work harder because I know that I don't know, I see potential in myself because you saw potential in me, as corny as that sounds. So I'm going to keep grinding. I'm going to keep doing this thing, and I don't know exactly where it's going to take me, but I'm looking forward to the journey. So if you're listening and you've gotten this far in this episode or in my podcast in general, thank you so, so much for following along. I really appreciate it. And we're just going to keep this thing going. So thanks, and I will see you next episode.